Hi everyone, hope you can hear me very clear. And yeah, let's talk about the very science of behind the uploading consciousness. And it's a fascinating subject, isn't it? So the topic is being discussed in many movies and many of course novels. You are pretty familiar with this topic because yeah, it is insane. So let's first talk about myself. So I'm Dwivedi and I'm the founder of something called Extended Reality Developers of India community. And this is a community which is built around the very subject of virtual reality and augmented reality. So if you want to learn something or want to explore those technologies, want to make a career, so you can definitely check out YouTube channels and all everything. So I also run a small startup, and that startup is Unitile Studios. That is basically the service-based company around these same domain. And we are also building some sort of products. So let's talk about what Elon Musk has to say, because Elon Musk also has one startup around this subject called brain. Okay, so he has a startup called Neuralink, which is trying to understand brain and trying to convert the brain signal in such a way so that they can manipulate some sort of objects or some sort of limbs. He's trying to predict the limb motion from the signals of brain. There is a whole science called brain computer interface. I covered a video, I'll give you the link about that as well, where I talked about brain computer interface and specifically Neuralink. So Elon Musk is saying here that it's a state of the art engineering but beginner level neuroscience. It simply means that even understanding the neuroscience at the beginner levels, we have to understand the very core of technology. We are pushing the limits of technology. Still, it's just the beginner level neuroscience what we are able to achieve. And he is very true. So this subject, as I already said, it's being discussed in many fantasies, in many movies, many web series. So here are some great examples like Transcendence, and it's one of my favorite movie because Johnny Depp, we share the same birthday, 9th of June, and he was a great actor, and he discovered this, explored this story where he's uploaded into a computer by her wife, and he submerged himself with an AI. And what happened after that is the movie story. So let's also talk about movies like Upload. They explore the fantasy of being uploaded into a computer, and basically how you live in your afterlife inside a computer. There are also the black and dark side of the same fantasies, like the Black Mirror episodes, where they showed that how you can imprison someone in the very time. You have nothing to do in that eternity of time, and you can basically experience all the pain in several ways inside those simulations. So they explore the dark side of this fantasy, where this fantasy is somewhere used as a prison, the prison of mind, where you have no limb control, where you have no control over the body, but just the mind is there, and mind is basically suffering. So yeah, it's a great fantasy. So the problem is brain digitization. How do you digitize the brain? This is a very great subject, and we are going to talk about that. So whatever you feel about you, good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you are just this organ. You are sitting inside your skull, looking from your eye data, which is coming in terms of optical feed processed by your occipital occipital lobe, and this data makes the reality for you. Whatever you receive from your senses, five senses, of more than five senses, definitely there are much more than five senses. So whatever the data you are receiving, your brain is processing that data and creating something called reality for you. So next, what we need to know is there was a science called phrenology. It's a pseudoscience. It must not call it science. It was a pseudoscience, and the idea behind phrenology was that ancient people used to believe, not much ancient, 1820, they used to believe that this phrenology, one second, I'm just going to fix my screen because yeah, I think now it's much better visible for people who are watching on YouTube. So somebody commented that they are not being able to watch it. Okay, no worries. So now it's fixed, and so this science, phrenology, was a pseudoscience, and the idea was that these people had an idea that whatever we do, whatever we are experiencing, it's being stored in brain in some ways. So in several other sector, in several spatial locations, this data is being mapped, and they were pretty right about that, because now we can sort of literally, as we are doing almost the same thing even now, that we are associating the anatomy of brain with some sort of functionality. You may ask, how do we do that? How we can say very with very confidence that all the abstract thoughts are coming from this frontal lobe. Your analytics is coming from some other part, but everything about thoughts, deep thoughts, those are coming from this frontal lobe. How can we say that? So the idea is, or the mapping thing happens. We use these sort of mappings called EEGs and fMRIs. So EEG, whenever your brain is doing some sort of or any sort of activity, it's basically an electrical signal. So we even refer it to as an electrical brain. So let's talk about this typical neuron. So a neuron has basically this sort of structure. So this part is known as the axon, and these other are the dendroids. So these dendroids and these axons are made something called a neuron, and in the center obviously there is a nucleus. So let's talk about these axons and what they are basically. So these axons are the input of any neuron. So through these inputs, the neuron is basically receiving information from other neurons. So a single neuron doesn't do much, but a collection of neurons makes all the processing happen. Okay? So the very idea, and we can even mathematically represent this, the very idea is that there are some inputs are being sent in neurons through the axons obviously, and then in the from the dendroids the outputs are being sent. So let's understand it. So there are some sort of inputs being sent in this neuron, in this as an input. Then there are some processing being done, and usually we refer this processing as the sum of these weights. So whatever the weight 1 is coming, weight 2 is coming, or input 3 is coming, we apply some sort of weight on this inputs x, y, and x1, x2, and x3. We apply those weights. It's basically we apply we say that how much effective this x1 should be. So we say, oh, it's going to be effective only 70%, so we apply this 0.7 weight here. So similar thing is happening in this neuron, typical neuron as well. And then we have some sort of activation function that okay, this neuron will only fire if it's above some certain level, otherwise it will not fire. So this is the mathematical representation of a biochemical product. But again, this works pretty much the same way and it produces the same results. So in computer science, in artificial intelligence, we can create these sort of mathematical models of neurons and connect them in an arrangement in such a way that it behaves like a brain. It is able to distinguish the data from other kind of data. It is able to distinguish the images and find difference between cats and dogs. Again, how do we know that what part is associated with what sort of activity? We have to basically scan the brain. So whenever these neurons are firing, it basically means they are sending some sort of signals. They are sending some sort of electrical signal, producing some sort of electrical, very small packets of electricity, electrons being transferred, and these electrons are being generated through biochemical ways, and then but we through this you can say through this dots, in simple language, we are able to sense those electrons, and accurately map that which part of electrons is being excited, or which part of brain is being excited at what activity. So what task are we doing? So that's called that. Also, we study that in very detail. There's a different sort of machine. The previous one you saw is EEG, and next is this fMRI. So MRI machine, when it's used with the functional methods, means we give you a task. Maybe the task is a puzzle solving or playing a guitar. These sort of tasks are being given to a subject, and we put them in fMRI machines, and then we study that what part of the brains are being lit up. By lit up, we mean what the very flow of blood, the very flow of fluids in the brain are being associated with the activity. So where is the most activity and where is the least? So that's how we basically map the brain to its functionality. So whatever you see here, these functionality are being mapped by these sort of experiments. So I talked about the same phenomena, about how the mapping works and everything works in this session. I was speaking at Global Entrepreneur Week at USA, so where I spoke about this subject. You will find this video on my channel. So let's talk about a little more in depth. What we have to do if we want to map the conscious brain into some sort of unconscious device like a memory stick. Okay, so again, we need to make some sort of assumptions that consciousness is the outcome of brain's physical arrangement. Okay, and this phenomena is also, this understanding is also known as physicalism. So we have to assume that only the arrangement of these neurons are creating some sort of illusion of consciousness. We don't really understand what is consciousness even today. So we have to believe on our feelings, that we feel that whenever we arrange these sort of neurons in this sort of patterns, it creates the illusion of consciousness. You start believing, okay, there is an I inside my brain somewhere. Okay, so now let's talk about second assumptions which we need to take in consideration. Then that is, we could one day understand brain 100%. Right now we don't, but we could understand the brain 100%, and we can sort of replicate it 100%. So what do I mean by that? For example, you understand your motorbike 100%, and whenever one part is not working, you can replace it with some newer part, or you can find some jugaad to make it work. But it does not applicable in the terms of neuroscience. So we don't 100% understand our brains, and we don't 100% know that how we can convert a biological brain into a mechanical or into a digital one. Okay? So we need to understand it 100% to be able to convert it into a digital format. Now, third assumption is that that we need to make sure, or we need to start believing that computers are good hosts. What do I mean by that? I don't know, or nobody knows that how a person gonna feel inside a computer. Okay, it's a question of a philosophy, that how do nobody knows how you feel after death. Nobody knows how you feel after your heart stops beating and brain stops getting any sort of blood circulation. So we need to understand what will happen in between, or when we'll put somebody's consciousness into a computer, how it's going to react. What will happen if the power is off, for example? What will happen between when no peripheral is there, which means there is no way to get input or no way to express the output, or simply nothing is there? What will happen? So we need to assume that it's going to be all right, and the computers are going to be a very good host. So after these assumptions, still there are some problems. So let's understand what is the realistic problems in mapping a brain completely to a computer, or you can also say transferring the consciousness into a digital machine. Okay, so the numbers are the problem. There are 84 billion neurons in your head, and in some head there are approximately 100 billions. So you can vary, this number can vary between these range, 84 billion to 100 billion approx. So what do I mean by that? Each and every single neuron could be able to connect to 1500 more neurons. So one single neuron is connected to several other neurons, and each neuron is connected with several more neurons. So these connections, the way they are connecting is called something called connectomes. The very arrangement in these neurons are connected, and there are 100 trillions of synapses in there. And there is also a substance called glia. So glia is basically the structural component which gave the neurons the structure, the binding of the glia. But we don't really understand the functionality of this glia very well. So in 80s it used to be understood that glia is just for basically binding the neurons, but and giving them a structure, a solid structure, constructive structure. But now we can also observe some sort of effect when this glia is losing, or when this glia is missing, or in patients where some part of the brain is missing because of glia lack, and what sort of differences are there. We can actually measure that. So it's maybe not just related to giving a structure, maybe it has some sort of functionality of that. Also there is one more thing. The very fMRI scan resolution is very broad. In it's 1 micron. So in 1 micron there could be thousands or even hundreds of thousands of brain neurons. So it's very hard to scan. It's like you are trying to find a single orange picture. You are trying to find a picture of a single orange by looking at the whole village. So it's a hard task. So whatever you feel, wherever you think you are actually existing here. This piece of meat is defined who are you and how you feel and what you think about yourself, but we don't know how. We don't know what is exactly consciousness and in which part of brain is it existed. So the basic idea is it's divided in between all the parts. All the parts contribute in some ways to the consciousness. We know where are the motor skills, we know where are the occipital lobe, for example. This is responsible for processing the images coming from your eye and all those things. This is responsible for all the abstract data, abstract ideas. There are all the motor and the limb control systems and everything. We know that left part is associated with right side and right part is associated with left side of the body. So we know these things, but we still need to figure out where the hell is consciousness. We don't really understand that. Also there are some sort of evidence that the gut is also responsible for how you feel and how you basically the mind could be influenced by that as well, and also the heart has some sort of influence on your emotions. So these are very we don't really sure about that. If we 100% scan successfully and 100% map successfully all these 84 billion neurons and hundreds of trillions of synapses with the glia in consideration, and all the connectomes are perfectly mapped, even after that, are we going to replicate consciousness? It's a big question. So this is the problem. So now let's talk about if anyone has already did it. So the answer is yes, it's being done before. It's being done in 2014. So this is a video I'm going to play with. There's no voice. So it's the science is called connectomics because we were mapping the connectomes. So here in this research, the brain is nothing but the mapping between, or the intelligence is nothing but the mapping between input and output. In artificial intelligence, whenever we code some sort of artificial intelligence system, we always talk about how the mapping between input and output works. And here we are looking at the same things. So here there are four sort of sensors. One is basically the interior touch. These three are the several different you can say there are several different sonic systems, sort of a small mini sonar. At Arduino level you get those. So they basically give a signal whenever there is something in front of them, and they also give the signal also contains the detail that how far the object is from you. So these three data are from different parts of that particular bot. Okay, I forget to tell that it's a C. elegans. C. elegans is basically a type of worm. Okay, and that brain cell only contains 302 neurons. So the biggest problem, as I mentioned, is solved. Where the biggest problem, what I said was about the 84 billion neurons. So this is a much simpler brain which we tried to map, and it's a worm called C. elegans. And C. elegans has only 302 neurons and only 1000 synapses. So it was easy to replicate in digital format. So again, we mapped the C. elegans and we uploaded the body of C. elegans in simulation, and you can see whenever there is some sort of input, there is some sort of output being generated. What happened when we put these input and output in a machine? So this machine is basically, whenever it receives some sort of signal from nose, it always change direction like a C. elegans should do. So it's changing the direction based on where if any obstruction is there in the way, it's changing the direction by itself. So these sort of activities, it is behaving the way a C. elegans should do. But it does not really mean that human could be also replicated 100%, but there could be a possibility as well. But it's being done. That's the only point. We can transform a C. elegans into let me also show you in the same video. It's not playing for some reason. Okay, cool, now it's playing. Okay, so in this video you can also see this map. So this is the exact connectome map. Each single box is basically a neuron firing and neuron talking to some other neuron. So each block is basically representing how the values are influencing to other neurons. And this is the process of this whole process is being generating the output. That's what we can see. So the brain is already firing, the brain is already working. Now also I would like to show you this one more detail here. So if I open this one, so this is a study. I have linked it here. So let me also guide you about this. So this is a brain map created of a mouse. So let's see this beautiful structure first, then I'll talk about this. So this is a very small portion of a mouse's brain. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what exactly you saw there. Okay, so hold on. Let me just not download, present this so that you can see this in full screen. Okay, cool. So there what they did is basically they took 1 millimeter cube of a mice brain from an area which is associated with the neural processing, the vision processing system. Okay, so they took 1 millimeter area of that vision processing, okay, and then divided that 1 millimeter cube into 25 slices, and then they scanned. So in this 1 millimeter cubic area, there were almost 100,000 neurons, 8 lakh neuron, and 1 billion synapses. So already it's a very complex task, as you may already know. There were 4 kilometer worth of nerve fiber. So how big is this 1 cubic millimeter? This is approximately, you can assume, how can I say, it's it's like a rice ka ek dana, like that, rice, single rice grain or something like that. So even that big of a brain had these 4 kilometer nerve fiber in it. So, and then we scanned these 25 slices, and then what we got is five so basically five electron microscopes worked on this particular slices, these 25 slices. So five each, five micro slice each, and then they scanned these slices for continuously for 5 months. So it took them 5 months to scan them completely in their entirety. So that's how dense these 1 cubic millimeter brain was. And what we produced after that was 100 million of images. And then the 3D software, the 3D algorithms run for 3 months, and then they reconstructed that particular 3D video which you saw. Obviously that was not 3D, that was a single image of that 3D copy, which means the scientists were able to rotate and see and dissect that particular 3D video in whatever the way possible, whatever the way they want. But that was just a recorded video, so you can't. That run for 3 months it took to reconstruction. After 5 months of recording, it took 3 months of reconstruction for that 3D algorithm, 3D image to be generated. And once that is generated, that took 2 million GBs of data. So 2 million GBs of cloud storage being taken that one single millimeter cube. So again, it just simply says that how much dense it's there. So according to us, this research, we know that if we try to scan human mind, it will basically take 84 around 84 petabyte of data. So how much is 84 petabyte of data is insane. So you cannot simply just scan yourself in a computer or your mobile phone. You definitely need cloud storage, and a huge amount of cloud storage, 84 petabytes. So that's insane. So what are the alternate solution? It already looks like it will take more than so according to some surveys and some scientists predictions, it will take around 40 years or more to scan a human brain like this. Again, there is one more problem with scanning human brain. If we want to scan a human brains using an fMRI machine, for example like this, if you want to scan in that resolution, so as I said, this resolution is around 1 micrometer. So if you want to scan more than that using this fMRI machines, the kind of magnets we require is basically going to burn your brain. There is no way to scan the brain alive. So again, when we are not scanning the brain alive, also there's a question of, is the consciousness still there in the brain? Because yeah, we really could not say anything for sure in this case. So apart from all these questions, the expectation is it will take another 40 years for these type of technology to be around. So now let's talk about what are the alternative solutions and what I recommend you, what is the easiest way of doing the same thing. Okay, so there is a hack, and yeah, he did it. So he is a Holocaust survivor. You know about Holocaust. So
what happens when the last Holocaust survivor dies? Who will tell their story? And is there a way to be remembered forever?
Do you think you were brave during the Holocaust?
Okay, so what they did is they basically scanned him using a technology called basically virtual scans, not virtual scan, volumetric capture. So volumetric capture is basically the technology where let me show you. Yeah, so these are a lot of cameras. It requires around 1000 to 2000 cameras, and they align everywhere. Okay, so they surround you with those cameras, and they put you in this sort of green room where you are just there, and these cameras record from all the direction. This technology is called volumetric capture, and it basically captures you. So what they did, they gave him a list of questions. There are you can call them frequently asked questions. So he spoke about those 100 or 200 questions which you can ask to him, and that is being recorded in these volumetric capture technologies, and this can be again played for another 100,000s of years in virtual reality and augmented reality technologies. So that's how you basically scan somebody or basically record their consciousness like a photo. So like you can take a photograph and that's an optical image of that, but if you can record a video, that is basically you are recording his conscious perspective about life. And also we can also in future discover or train AI to understand you more. The Google is doing that right now. Google is trying to understand you in several ways. What you like, what you dislike, how do you behave, what is your daily routine or something like that. So Google is doing that all the time, and all sort of AIs are doing this sort of experiments or study with you. So again, this is another example. Here, a mother in Korea, she tried to bring back her deceased child, and so that she can celebrate one more birthday of her inside virtual reality. So she's wearing right now a technology called haptic gloves, so she can even touch her face and feel that something is there instead of nothing being there. So she can see her, she can touch her, she can talk to her, and she can celebrate one last birthday of her. So that is also being done. This is a Korean company which did that, but this is totally possible with several ways. Also, what I was talking about, the AI, like Google is trying to understand you. So Google can understand the way you questions or the way you answer any question. So suppose if I ask you how is the weather, and you can basically predict how's the weather, look at the conditions of clouds, and you can pretty much predict that how's the weather going to be. Similarly, the AI works. AI make predictions about the surroundings or the given data. In your case, the surroundings are the given data, but in that given data, that input data could be anything. So that's how AI basically works. And if you give enough data about yourself to AI, that AI could predict, and that AI basically could tell stories in your way. So right now, there's a guy telling his stories in his from his perspective, but that could be replicated. We can make an AI understand you the best way possible, study on you, and that could be your replica. That could pretend to be you. And there are a lot of people who did that. For example, even there's a very Black Eyed Peas. What is that guy? I think that is will.i.am. So will.i.am also did the same thing, and he created his AI counterpart, his AI conscious. So that sort of technology always blows my mind. So now let's move on to questions. If anyone has any questions related to this, I really appreciate that this many people are listening to my conversation. So if you guys have any sort of questions about this, I'm looking at the chats right now. Yeah, I'm looking at it. PET scans. So PET scans are basically positron emission tomography. PET scans are used for the same thing, like you can say in this case neuritis. Yes. So PET scans are basically we put a dye in your brain. Okay, and that dye is basically gives us the way how the blood is flowing and basically all that. So we can scan your detail in great detail. scan your brain in very detail, I wanted to say. So MRI and PET scans are being merged, and MRI and CT scans and PET scans, all three are being merged, and so that doctor could get a greater picture, greater detail in several perspectives. So all the scans, like CT scans, some CT scans cover some other part of the brain details, and the MRI covers some other part of the brain details. And when you overlay them, that overlay is basically gives you a brighter picture, better picture of brain, what's going on in the brain. But that is just the anatomical and structure. We don't really know that yeah, we don't know a lot of things about brain. We can know using PET scan the anatomy of the brain, and is there any blockage or something like that. We can use PET scan instead of MRI, right? No. MRI is a greater detail than PET scan. PET scan is basically just giving us the flow of how good is the flow, is there any sort of blockage or aneurysm, that is being covered by the PET scan. PET scan is not bright or greater detail. So let me also tell you that, can you also tell about EEG? So I was going to tell that. So EEG is basically, yeah, EEG is, you can also say EEG is very great in timing, very great in frequency, but not very good in resolution. On the other hand, MRI is very good with resolution, but not very good with frequency. It takes very great amount of time for a patient to sit in there, and then we can scan one cycle. So something like that. So EEG and MRIs are used for different purposes. EEG is basically trying to understand the electrical composition of a brain and which part of the brain is being firing the most. It is looking at a great segment, a huge amount of segment at once. And the MRI is looking at a very high resolution segment, which means a very small detail, but it's looking at the flow of the fluids in your brain and how they are working. So they are very different and very essential for different purposes. You mentioned causal bot to reality. Yeah, totally. You mentioned the way. Was the life cycle of project of C? I have really no idea about that, the life cycle of C. elegans. So I'm not really sure. The idea is here. So our body is a clock, right? Isn't it? So you don't have just a clock hanging there on your wall, but your body is also a clock. Each cell of your brain or each cell of your entire body has a life cycle. It ends at certain point, it ages and it ends. We don't know that is this life cycle is just chemical composition, or is it also a connectome composition, which means it will basically end at a certain purpose served. We don't really know about it. So if we convert the brain into some sort of digitized manner, so is it going to end it somewhere, or is it going to be running for eternity? We don't really know. It could be really complex, and it could be have some sort of cycle or some sort of clock in there, that after a certain purpose, no matter how hard you try to recover it, it is just going to corrupt itself, and maybe that's why we die. We don't really know. So it's a very deep question. We don't really know. The answer is we don't really know about these sort of life cycles and all those sort of things. It's a very deep question. How far is too far AI? Okay, the video is sent by someone is really good one, because in this Robert Downey Jr. Tried to make people aware about what is AI and how AI basically works. And here he was talking about how AI is changing the way world works. So it's a great documentary, and it's a great way to look at things. He talk about artificial limbs and everything. So yeah, I mean the life cycle in terms of operational cycle, in terms of execution. I'm really not the expert of that subject, so I don't really know about that. I'm sure what you are saying, but right now what we received, what we discovered from that CE elegant system is basically how the movement works in and there was also a component of food. So obviously the elegant was trying to go towards the food. So that was for sure. Do you virtual immortality will be reality? Of course, the virtual mortality could be a reality because the AI will be able to understand you, understand the very behavior of you. So once you are gone, it could take your place in maybe for very essential tasks. That after when you are gone, your what does a will do when a person is gone? The will at a law structure, the will takes care of what this person wanted and how that should be done. So that's a lawful structure of how when somebody is gone, whatever he wanted or whatever he crafted should remain in his own will. So he can define that. So this is going to be same. So whenever you are gone, the AI is there on your behalf taking care of your stuff maybe. So that sort of immortality could exist. Since fMRI and EEG proven that human don't have free will our upload. So it's not proven that humans don't have free will. So let's understand it. So what we figured out, I know where this question is coming from. What we saw when we suppose give some sort of task to a person, okay, that let's make a decision. Do you want to choose A or B? We can, in the MRI scan and EEG scans, we can totally see that he wants to choose A or B a milliseconds before he actually make the decision. Okay, so the idea is maybe he is making the decision through his limb, or maybe he is making the decision telling the decision through his mouth. The idea is it takes some sort of time, and maybe we don't have discovered free will or non-existent of free will, but we have discovered that there is a big amount of delay. Of course, there's a big amount of delay in input as well. We see something and our brain actually corrects for what we are seeing in time. So it has to, so for example, if somebody is talking far away from you, your brain has to sync the very mouth of that person from the visual system with his voice, because the voice travel at less speed than the very vision or the very light. The voice will travel late, but the brain is going to sync that. So that sort of brain, that sort of illusion brain creates for you. But the delay is there. Even the voice is going to be processed very late, and because it's a processing takes time. It's basically just like that. So I think it's not that we discovered that there's no such thing as free will, but we just discovered that how much delay is there between your brain deciding to do something and your limb deciding to do something. That's not agreed by all scientists. Yes, even if we don't go it neurological ways, obviously we can prove with Einstein's relativity theory that there's no such thing as free will. The time is the way it is, and it's going to be the way it is forever. So everything is already defined and already going to be there. So I can totally get your point, but my perspective is that it's just basically the delay between the brain deciding something to do and the organ deciding, the hand and the mouth deciding to actually convey that feeling of brain. So I think that's the delay. Could observing the brain enlightened person help us create such AI? How do we define enlightenment? Because that is a very questionable subject. We have experienced so many, I should not talk about that, but we have experienced so many people in history who claim to be enlightened, but then we find out they are just a very, very materialistic person, and they have, for example, 43 Rolls Royce, I'm talking about. So yeah, how do we define enlightenment? It's very personal. You can say that I'm enlightened, but how do we test it? How do we put it at a test? It's a very personal thing. So we have to first define enlightenment. Is there something called enlightenment at the first place? What is the very definition? What is the physical properties of enlightenment? So that are the questions. So once we define that, obviously there are exceptions. Obviously no two brains are just exactly like each other. Whenever we see a scan, there is some sort of difference, and when we train the AI to read the scans, we have to basically prepare for these sort of differences in two brains, and the AI has to prepare for differences in these two brains. Could observing the brain enlightenment? Yeah, it's the same question. I think somebody is typing. So yeah, I think let me know. Did you guys enjoy the conversation? Did you guys? I mean, it does not really matter to me, but did you guys really like this session or not? I'm not really sure. I believe if virtual mortality is achieved, you think living metaverse reality. Again, these are two very different subjects. So yeah, metaverse is basically us trying to find out, is there anything beyond this universe or not? At string theory, we can totally prove mathematically that there is a metaverse. In quantum physics also we can prove that there is a metaverse. Actually quantum physics one is I'm not really sure about, because that is more like an assumption. So I'll talk about quantum physics when I'll tell you that why I don't think that quantum physics actually is pointing about multiple universes, but string theory definitely does. These are two very different concepts, one being digitized and living for eternity, and one discovering multiverse. That could happen even now. Even now we could receive some signal from out of universe, maybe somehow, and then we could say, okay, there is multiverse. But that are two very different subjects. So that is not related with living eternity. Wonderful session. Thank you, man. We please look at Earth 2.0. I was not talking about Earth 2.io. So Earth 2.io, I was discussing that about yesterday, that there is someone who's creating a cryptocurrency, or basically shifting a blockchain technology in such a way that he creates the replica of Earth, and it becomes basically you can purchase land, and it's basically work exactly like the real state property and something like that. You are purchasing real estate, but you are purchasing virtual state, and it also follows the rules of blockchain. So Earth 2.0 does that, but I have a different candidate. You must check out Decentraland. So they even have a Discord server. I have their Discord server. Let me just quickly find Decentraland for you. So if I try to go here, I'm going to search for Decentraland. So check out Decentraland, and they are actually following this. They are actually adopting the blockchain technology. I'm sure they are not as famous as Earth 2.0, but you can actually build your own virtual land, and you can craft your own virtual land, and each virtual land based on how good it is built has the higher price than other. So Decentraland is a must check out. You can check about that. 2.0, I totally agree that stakes, and you guys might also be receiving messages from our 2.0 about buying the stock, but Decentraland is something worth checking out. So I'm going to type about that. Sorry. Decentraland. So check this out as well. Also, I have a small community compared to you, but it is already a great community of virtual reality and augmented reality developers. It's called XRDI, Extended Reality Developers of India. The session I'm doing right now, it's already available there. So thanks to Avalon Meta team for hosting me, and it's been a great talk being with Avalonians and discussing, because there are so many intellectuals on the community, and it's always an honor to talk about things like these there. So you can find several sessions. There are several topics. I am personally a medical imaging scientist, so I'm very interested in fMRIs and all these sort of things. I did several projects as well, which contained fMRIs. So yeah, that is a pretty much amazing thing to talk about. And I think this is it for the session. We took 50-minute journey. Thanks for staying with me. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you guys.